All right, welcome to The Ride. I'm Coach Q, and I'm happy to have you back for another episode. Today, I had the pleasure of sitting with Coach Ryan Danehy, head coach at Mercer Lacrosse. Coach Danehy has a vast amount of experience, having coached at both the pro and Division I level at the likes of Dartmouth, Penn, Michigan, New York Lizards, and Bucknell. Our conversation centered around building a program in the South, an interesting coach's rebuttal to the scheduling debate in 2026, early offense tactics, and more. As always, hopefully you find some value in it and enjoy the ride. All right, Coach Danehy, welcome to The Ride. I'm catching you on a bye week. I'm sure it's fantastic down where you're at. We're dealing with some colder weather still in the middle of freaking March, but I'm happy to be talking with you here today. Thank you for taking some time and speaking on the podcast.
You bet. It's actually a little chilly down here for the last 2 days. I have no idea why. It's like 45 degrees, but it's supposed to pick up to around 75 tomorrow. So,
all right, so that's what I go down to the South for, man. I'm excited to have this show. Right before we pressed live, we were talking about how you had your own show, man. Take me through that. I love to talk to content creators. You know, it's a different life that we live.
So in my time that I was not a part of Division I lacrosse, there was a couple years, and I was halfway in between. One of my best friends, Andy Towers, who if you're a lacrosse fan out there, you certainly know who Andy is. He was a longtime Chaos head coach, and so he was my assistant coach. Then I worked with him, and then I worked for him for what feels like well over a decade. We've known each other for a long time, and we still are in touch, dated like almost daily. How is
it having Andy Towers work for you? That's got to be intense. Well, both ways.
Well, no, I worked for him. Okay. I worked for him. Yeah. So we worked together as assistant coaches at Dartmouth. And then he ended up being the head coach. So then I was an assistant under him. He's electric. He's incredible. And, when I was thinking about podcasts started to become big, I think we started it around 2015 or so.
Wow.
Or 2016, somewhere in that realm. And I was thinking to myself, how do I get Andy's opinions on the game of lacrosse to the masses? And so I was like, let's just do this podcast. Let's have a lot of fun. And we did. And it lasted for a couple years. And the ratings and all that stuff. But I think at one point we had and we were like an ESPN. This is the best way I can describe it. We were like an ESPN kind of podcast where we would just talk about the games. So we didn't have very many guests on. So in order for our podcast to be relevant, you would have to tune in every week. Otherwise, you're listening to a podcast that was old news, right? But I think at one point we had around 3,000 unique listens, per week. And I was like, wow, this is unbelievable. Lacrosse All-Stars picked us up. So they kind of helped us, obviously, with the fan base and everything like that. But it was awesome. And to this day, every single phone call that I have with Andy is basically like a podcast. It's hilarious. He's got incredible thoughts on the games and opinions.
What makes him a great coach?
He's just a motivator. I think that, you see that come out largely in everything that he does. He's such a passionate human being. And he's also, and I think this came out during his time as a head coach in the PLL, he's incredibly intelligent. And his ability to create relationship with his players and his coaching staff and have always this down-to-earth, realistic approach to everything he does. He's super, super, super loyal. From that, I think that immediately gains respect from all of his players and his staff. And he's just an incredible human being. And so between that, his intelligence, and then obviously his X's and O's and just general motivating factors that he provides you on a day-to-day basis makes him an incredible coach.
We got to get Coach Towers on the podcast here soon. Maybe we'll get the band back together and I can just ask you guys both questions about lacrosse, man. That's awesome. Well, I want to get into some other questions here. I appreciate you bringing the content creator piece, man. I feel like lacrosse is in a spot, I hate to belabor this point because I've talked about it so much this year, but the media side, especially with the games getting canceled and moved and you can't watch the top ranked teams, I really, am hopeful that we can kind of get this on the right path with growing the game in the right way. And that just comes from having interesting personalities like yourself and Andy talking about the game and being able to watch top ranked matchups on TV. I don't know. Have you been feeling that? I know you're heads down, obviously in your own season, but have you been hearing about that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming you're talking about Richmond, Notre Dame this coming
Well,
weekend
that's
too.
coming up. I mean that yeah, that's a whole nother one. But I'm talking about kind of the beginning of the season, but we're still dealing with it, like you're saying right now.
Yeah, and I probably have the opposite thoughts of a lot of other people. I'm in the band with the rest of the coaches, to be honest.
Okay.
I'm not necessarily, somebody that thinks we should start later. I think we should start like this. I think right where we are is fine. And here's the next part. Everyone's like, "Oh, the weather stinks, this and that." I'm like, it's hard for us to find home games. Come on down. Like I'm telling you, it's real nice during February. Come on down. I know Jacksonville's willing to host as well. I'm
Yeah.
sure Bellarmine and Queens, they're willing to host as well. And so there are places where people can compete. But the women's lacrosse game, they used to have, or they still do right now. They have like a hard set, 20-hour week. And then the game grew on the women's side, and all the southern schools were like, "This rule is dumb. We should be able to start whenever we want because you got ASU, you got Florida, you got all these now Florida State, you got Clemson now." And they don't love the rule, the fact that you can't start when we want. We're all catering to the Northeast. Well, that's your own problem. Like we've got our own problems, being down south. So for me, I'm not a huge fan. And the greatest of all time, Gary Gate, comes on and he's like, "I want to play later. I want to play multiple games a week." And I think there was a stat that said he's lost 5 times outdoors since like what 2005 or something like that.
Yeah.
And the first thing I thought of was, oh my God, in 25 years, Syracuse has had 5 away games in February. Like, if you start the game later, Gary, you're not going to have the 4 home games that you've
You're not gonna have
locked
that
in
dome home
every
game.
single,
Yeah.
yeah, in the dome that you've guaranteed yourself because nobody has to worry about the weather. I think that it's every about 4 or 5 years people complain because the last couple of years there's been beautiful weather early in the year and we've had lacrosse to start. And so I,
Sure.
I understand the arguments for and against, but I'm more so keep it as
Well,
is.
I love this opinion because the people that I've talked to, for the most part, again on the media side, are more so, hey, can we get this to a point where we're getting more games on television? And I love that you're bringing in kind of a little bit of another side take. What I would kind of ask you now is more so on like the staggering of times or playing midweek games. What's your opinion on that? Right? You talked about moving the schedule, but playing midweek games, having Thursday night lacrosse, Friday night, Saturday, where they're not all at one time, I'd be interested. And also, I appreciate your take on the kind of south versus the north. That's a really interesting dynamic where you're like, hey, we don't have to deal with this issue whatsoever. But please let me know what you think about staggering.
Yeah, the staggered times. I was actually just talking about it with our staff recently. And so, just to put it in perspective, and yes, we are unique and we are outside the box in terms of what normal Division I lacrosse looks like. But we spend about $250,000 a year just to play our games. So now you're talking about Thursday night, which means no matter what, we're going to go in on a Wednesday night. We're going to fly in on a Wednesday night. We're going to spend Thursday, might do a shoot around Thursday, early morning, go to a Thursday night game. Then we're going to have to stay overnight again. That's another anywhere between $5,000 to $6,000 between hotel stay and more food to feed our guys. It's more time class that they're missing, and so now we are unique in that we could be the team that say stays on a Saturday where you got the Lehigh versus Lafayette game, right? They're 20 minutes down the road from each other, and it's a bad example because they're a league game, but whatever. I think you can get the point
Yep.
where they could easily do that. And I do think that those games oftentimes are played on the weekdays. You got St. Joe's Villanova that happens during the week, Drexel playing another, local Philly team during those times. But the staggered times is funny. I always say this. I'm like, all right, who's going to play the 2 o'clock game that no one wants to play in? Because everyone wants to get home at a reasonable time. So you're going to play a 2 o'clock game. You get out by the time you get, say, showered and done with the family tailgate at 6 o'clock. And oh, by the way, you have a 7-hour bus ride home.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's like, oh well, now you got to shift it based on bus rides and these kinds of things. It's a really really hard thing. And then the next thing, I totally understand this exposure. Nobody wants to grow the game more than I do. I promise you that. I'm a big fan of every game of lacrosse, from the women's side to the sixes to what the PLL and Paul. And I know you had Mike on the show, I believe, recently. Mike and I are classmates and teammates at Dartmouth when I played football with them. and he's doing a hell of a job. But the reality is like, what is the TV doing to return, the favor to us? It's not like we're gaining any sort of monetary value
Yeah.
from it. The game's going on ESPN either way, and until our game is actually getting shoved onto, oh, you get an ESPNU spot, and we're going to move you to 4 o'clock. Then I'll be like, I'll go 4. I'll go 5. I'll spend the extra $3,000 for the night, for the hotel night. Now, again, I'm Mercer University, and I don't necessarily have those choices like other teams do. But until the real slots start happening and we
Yeah.
actually get the true exposure, then what's the difference between 12, 11, 1, or 2?
It's almost like a chicken or the egg conversation, right? Because like in order to get to that spot where ESPNU is getting bids and all that stuff, we have to kind of break out of what we're doing now, or at least that kind of seems like the way to achieve that. The way, I believe Anish was talking about is that you just have to continuously improve the ratings to continuously get more and more, pieces. That's what softball's done. That's what a little bit of what college baseball's done. Yeah, man. What's the answer is kind of where I end up. I always end up like with my shrugging my shoulders, being like, hey, how do we get to that point where you are getting those ESPNU bids? I would love to get there, because it seems like you're open to that. It's just, what are you getting out of playing those other slots? Yeah, it's a fair point.
And at the same time too, if lacrosse is almost there, then the game against Northwestern between Notre Dame and Richmond should be a bidding war, and it's not. And I understand there's probably contractual stuff and things like that, but there's no one jumping at the fact that you have a 1-2 matchup in the world of lacrosse at a unique environment with a fan base that I'm sure is going to pack the house. And whether it's the Big Ten Network or it's ESPN or it's, say NBC and some of the alums that have been high up in certain aspects of the TV world. I realize it's a unique situation, but here we are at a neutral site and nobody's running to make it happen.
Yeah. All right, I don't want to get too far down this rabbit hole because it's going to piss me off. So we're going to move on a little bit. You were talking a little bit about your unique situation at Mercer, so I want to dive a little bit into that. Just talking about being in a non-traditional, hotbed, kind of a mid-major school, right? That doesn't have a traditional like blue chip background. How have you kind of gone about saying, hey, we're going to be successful here. This is the route for us in an area like Atlanta and in the South?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, there's kind of my vision for the program, and that's from bottom up, right? You got to build it, and then it's where we're placed, and I think it's a unique opportunity that we are in, where Atlanta lacrosse here has grown rapidly, and not only has it grown rapidly, the talent is incredible, and not only is the talent incredible, and I think this is an important piece. The talent is panning out at the next level. If you look at across the country at some of the non-traditional area kids who are at the top of these, recruiting rankings and things like that, all of it's deserved. Like these kids deserve these rankings because I see them too, and I'm like, yeah, they're really good. But what happens when they actually get to college? Are they panning out? And, without kind of going into the numbers, just from things that I see, because we had, recent games against kids playing from Georgia against us, or from Georgia playing against us, that are really making a massive, massive impact at the next level. And so we are in a unique situation where we're in a non-traditional place that is pumping out really, really high quality talent. But it also has to do with how you're going to build a program and how you're going to start. And certainly my vision for the program and where we've gotten to, hopefully to continue to move in a positive direction. But it's not all, oh wow, we're down south and we're 500 miles from the closest hotbed. It's you got to create your own
Sure.
niche in things, and I feel like we've done that here.
Yeah, I love seeing the highlights of guys like Sean Byrne, who I've had on the podcast, the Plunkets. I love, growing Southern lacrosse. I went to
Fountain on
Auburn.
the left side too. He's shooting the ball as well.
Yeah, he
Georgia
is.
boy.
He is. And I went to Auburn. I have a bunch of friends that went to Lambert and Roswell and all these, names down there. And it's awesome to see. How do you look at this from a recruiting perspective of saying how much of, I'm sure you don't say we need X amount from Georgia or from the South. I'm interested in how you kind of balance your roster with maybe more Northeast, more traditional hotbed guys with just recruiting Georgia really well or recruiting other areas of the South and West.
Yeah, I think our number one priority is number one to know every single player in Georgia. I think that that's really important, like, in terms of the quality talent. And we're pulling from right now three incredibly quality teams, club programs down here. And that includes obviously the multiple high schools that those kids come from. But there's three great club programs down here. And so we need to know who they are. We need to know, all of the ins and outs, and because we want to command the Georgia market of talent. I think that that is a number one priority for us because there is something to be said for kids wanting to stay close to home, especially when you're down south like this. Kids oftentimes get up the Northeast and they're like, man, it's cold in January during preseason, and oh yeah, I'm not getting a ton of looks right now, and I'm not playing a ton, and oh yeah, mom and dad can't see me play every single weekend, and so from that standpoint, I think that that sentiment is being passed along from year to year that staying closer to home is awfully nice, and so from that standpoint, I think it's a huge benefit for us to make sure that we know every single Georgia player and go out there and recruit Georgia. Like I said before, there's great talent. And there's another unique part about Mercer that not a lot of people know, and I've said this a few times on various outlets, but Macon has its own airport, and there are two flights a day. And both of those flights fly round trip to Dulles, direct to Macon. And for the last decade, it was actually BWI. And
Okay.
so I literally can get a family from their home in the DMV area to my office in under 3 hours. And that includes getting to the airport with 40,
So
40 minutes or so
so does that
from
show
your
up on
flight.
your roster?
It
These guys?
does. It
Really?
does.
Okay.
Yeah. So about 40% of our rosters from what I would consider, WCAC, the DC area and the MIAA. And then 40% of our rosters from Georgia. And then 20% of our roster is from, all over, anywhere from Connecticut, Ohio to California, Texas, and so forth. So
That's
we've,
such
and it's getting even more aggressive now too. Like we've used that contour flight to get families to campus like aggressively from the DMV area.
that is the most interesting little quirk that I've seen related to a lacrosse team. Well, you
Yeah.
would never know it if you didn't, talk with you about it. I'm sure there's people that understand it, but I wonder if there's like those little quirks on a lot of other teams. That would be super interesting to
Well, a
find
lot
out.
of
But
it is they live about 25 miles from campus, so they just drive there. You know what I mean? Because
yeah,
they are
it's
from,
fair.
it's from the Northeast. And like, I'll even use it at Bucknell. Bucknell was, they say it's in the middle of nowhere, and they, retort, it's actually in the middle of everywhere. And that couldn't be more true. It's literally 3.5 hours from every major hotbed in the Northeast, from Rochester, Syracuse, Buffalo to Long Island to DC to Baltimore to Philly. You're within a 3.5 hour radius of Bucknell. And so that's a unique caveat so they can get kids to campus that much quicker.
Yeah.
For us, we actively recruit the DMV area because I know I can get them on a flight pretty quickly, and it's 9 minutes from my office to the airport, and it's like 1975 security. I can literally get out of my car, go and pick them up at the gate, and bring them to my car and drive them to the to
That
my
is
office.
a really interesting story. I appreciate you bringing that in here. Do you have other conversations with the non-traditional hotbed coaches talking about how to potentially, continue recruiting and kind of their struggles and or their improvements and things like that they've made as well? Like I think about
I,
like a Utah or I think about a Bellarmine, like these teams that are just in areas that aren't the Northeast essentially.
Yeah, I think it's unique if you look at the ASUN too, because obviously they kind of bucket us all together, and we're all at those non-traditional area teams. Each of us have our own unique pros and cons, but it's also offset by the different styles of schools. So Air Force, you got a service academy. That's in a totally different, bucket. Utah is an FBS program, and so they're in a kind of a different bucket. And then you've got the A-Sun schools. So you got Bellarmine,
Like
Jacksonville, and
Jacksonville. Yep.
Queens. And those three schools don't have football programs. And so the resources shift a little bit in terms of their resources that they put in men's lacrosse. And then you got us. And we're a top end FCS program for football. And there's a huge, and we've only had a program for now 13 years, and we've finished in the top 5 of FCS, over the last couple of years, which is pretty incredible. So the resources are going one. So we all have these unique challenges in terms of our respective schools. And they're all such unique, different schools from an academic profile to, again, you got Utah, big, FBS to Air Force and service. And then, again, different styles of every institution. So we're all battling our own respective, cons, but then we're all taking advantage of all of our respective pros as well.
All right, I want to switch gears just a little bit and talk kind of inside the lines or more coaching related aspects here. You had Army and Richmond on your schedule to start this year. Those are two really strong, just teams in general, obviously Richmond being the number 2 team in the country. What is it like from, a head coach perspective, maybe an offensive perspective of prepping just for 2 strong defensive laden teams? Although I guess you could claim Army and Richmond are both very balanced. So what was it like kind of prepping for those 2 teams early this year?
Yeah, two things before I kind of go into it is one, it has to do with how we want to schedule teams. When I plan out our thought, and I include our staff in this discussion as well, but when we plan out who we want to play, it really does come down to who mimics to the best of our ability the teams we're going to play in season or in our
In
league play.
conference. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so you look at Army and Richmond, and then the second piece to it is we are looking to make sure we can get return home games. That's important because last year we only had 3 home games on a 13-game schedule. So it can happen like that. This year we have 7, so a little bit different. But from there too, I also, I couldn't have more respect for Coach Amati and Coach Alberici, 2 guys that had a major impact on me as a player, believe it or not. Coach Amati was my assistant coach when I was an undergrad at Dartmouth for his first 2 years of coaching period. And Coach A was probably a big reason why I ended up at Dartmouth. He was an assistant coach at Duke. And so, I have a ton of respect for those 2 guys. And to be honest, I study their programs a lot from a head coach and even as a coordinator at one point, perspective where like I want to emulate these programs. And 2 of them are very different. Army, obviously service, and then Richmond is very similar in a lot of ways to Mercer. They started around the same time. Certainly the resources that Richmond has put into their program is far different than ours. But just the way, Dan has built that program from ground up has been tremendous. So how does it get to your question? Well, number one, Army, in a lot of ways simulates what we're going to see in Air Force. It's a service academy. They've got big, fast, strong, big athletes, big off the bus. That's why we schedule Army. And then Richmond looks a lot like a cross between what Utah and Jacksonville will give us in a lot of different ways. And probably to an X times 2 kind of pace. And the 2 things that I always say when we schedule these things is one, it teaches our guys a lot of lessons, and it lessons early in the season. If you get outside of yourself, so they're heavy defensive teams, and like you said, they're actually very, very balanced all over the field, from their face-off units to the right clear game to their offensive styles as well. But I think the biggest lessons it teaches us is when you get outside of yourself as an individual, they don't make mistakes and they'll capitalize on that. So if you're lazy in your skill sets offensively, they're going to take the ball away. If you're not getting to the proper spot and getting there with, a body language that wants to receive a pass or shoot, catch and shoot right away, you're going to lose the extra inch or foot that you gained because they're going to close that gap that much faster. Even from an offensive perspective, or even a defensive perspective, you've got to know where 4 and 11 are for Army, the Plunkett brothers. Like, and if you don't, they will torch you on the offensive end. No different from, hey, if number 5, Aiden O'Neill from Richmond, if he goes to the bathroom, our attackmen should be pointing and being like, yo, he's going to the bathroom right now, fellas. Like, you got to know where they are at all points of the game. And the earlier that we recognize the importance of all of these things, the quicker we improve week to week, and there's no question that we have. And when we stay within ourselves with our individual prep, but also stay within what we do from a scheme perspective, we're competitive. We go out there and we compete. But it does show pretty quickly. Not only do they capitalize on mistakes, but they'll capitalize on mistakes and makes runs from them. And so our guys are like, okay, all right, I can't do that. I can't, take for granted X, Y, and Z. I have to stay the course. I have to stay with what we do well, and I have to stay within what I do well as well. So from those aspects, that's why we do schedule those teams, because they do mimic a lot of what we're going to see later on in the year.
Well, from the fan perspective, first of all, it's great to watch those kind of teams play your team, right? Like those are the matchups that we want to see. I
appreciate that.
It's interesting because like they put a ton of pressure on you to be perfect is what I'm hearing, right? Like you can't beat yourself or they're going to absolutely go on huge runs. I do want to unpack kind of the program building side that you mentioned before. You said you obviously had known both of these coaches, so that's great insight. I'd be interested to hear about like Chamati as a younger assistant coach, because I just know him as the head coach at Richmond now. But what did you pull out from, both of these coaches when you were doing your research, or just kind of trying to understand how they made their programs great, right? Like what specific kind of DNA were you trying to pull out and put into what you're building with Mercer here?
Yeah, so in truth, there's only so much I can parse out without actually getting in their office every single day. And so for me, I've always had a lot of respect for Coach A. And I'll give you a quick story. When I was in the process and recruiting process, Duke was a part of that process. But I'll never forget that Coach A gave me a call and he's like, "Hey Ryan, like I know one of your priorities in this process is to make an impact as fast as possible. And truthfully, I just don't know if you're going to make the impact you want here right away." And I said, "Thanks, Coach. I appreciate that. And I'm going to look at other options because I wanted to make an impact right away. I didn't want to sit on the bench." And luckily, I didn't decide to pursue Duke because this guy named Danehy and this guy named Zach Greer ended up coming in, and I would have never for 4 years ever saw the field. And you would have thought that the conversation at that point would have ended, but it didn't. Coach A was like, "So, who are your other choices?" Like he actually cared about where my future was. And from that moment on, like, look at all of the things that Coach A has done. Like, of course, you got the "don't be a bully" speech or be a good guy speech that he does, and trying to emulate the character that Coach A brings to the game of lacrosse is something I've always admired. And I've tried to. I'll never be able to do that. He's a special guy, and just his interaction with me before games and scheduling. He caught a lot of smoke because he played us in a tough year last year when, arguably, if he played potentially a tougher team, he might have gotten the at-large, right? And I said, "Coach A, I totally understand if you need to find another opponent." He said, "Ryan, I don't give a shit about that. We're actually going to come to you." And that's Coach A. And honestly, it means a lot to have a guy like him that's willing to come down to us, and it just speaks volumes about the type of guy. And look at the program he's running; it's truly incredible. And Coach Chamati. They are. And Coach Chamati, Coach Chamati and I, in his first year, Coach Chamati kind of took a back seat, right? He's learning. It's his first year as a coach. But you could tell really quickly he knew the game really, really well. And he would come over to the side and he'd give you little pointers, and I'm like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And but one of the things about Coach Amati that I'll always respect is he is a cutthroat competitor. And I consider myself a cutthroat competitor. And I'll give you another little story about Shamati. We would play Coach Sowell, and Coach Shamati would challenge anybody on the team 2-on-2, game to a full court, game to 100 in basketball. And I probably played Coach Shamati and Sowell, I want to say 24 times in 1 year, because it was only 1 year because Ricky ended up going to St. John's to start the program there. And I would forget that Dan was my coach, and we would get in almost full-fledged fist fights during these 2-on-2 full court games 100. And I just had, like, afterwards, I'm like, oh my God, he's my coach. Like, he's got
You
a
didn't
chip
actually
tooth
go
for
to
the rest of
100, did you?
yeah. Oh yeah. There were breaks at 25. And it was Coach Sowell's way of, I might be 45 or whatever he was at the time, of saying I might be older, but I'm still more in shape. I'm still tougher, and I'm still like, but I refuse to let that roll. And then Dan, he had a great mid-range jumper, but Dan was like the player. He's just a great overall athlete in everything he does. But and to this day, I hope this is published. Dan Shamati's got a chipped tooth, front tooth from me, from about 20 years ago when we were playing, 25 years ago, when we were playing 2-on-2 full court game to 100. But his competitive spirit, the intricacies that he knows the game of lacrosse, that honestly bummed me out, because I'm like, man, like, you grew up in such a great environment, and he's a West Jenny guy, and you were able to take all that in. And I was blessed to grow up in the environment I was raised in terms of lacrosse, but far different than the West Jenny guys. And so between those two things, and then you can just see the building of a program and what Richmond has done year over year. And then we started to butt heads in the recruiting process when I was at Bucknell, and I'm like, oh man, here we go. And like, we would give each other looks on the recruiting circuit, and he would, like, look at me and shake his head, and I would start laughing, just because it's just like, it's a constant compete. And I love that in him, and I admire it so much. So
It takes you to another level, that competitive spirit of what you're willing to do. But playing a game to 100, that's the first time I've ever seen that. So that's a great insight, man. You're giving me some great background stories, and I'll take that chip 2 story as well. We'll probably make a clip out of it.
Yes, perfect.
Let's talk a little bit more. I want to kind of jump out of your season now and talk a little bit more kind of inside the line stuff and your background with Michigan. I'm a big fan of Michigan's program, being an MCLA guy, having gone to Auburn. But anyways, the season that you're having now with Mercer, anything that you kind of want to pull out, some of the games that you've had, or just the lessons you've learned, or just kind of more this season related?
I think, as I looked at the season and I looked at last year, so this last year was kind of a carbon copy of what we look at this year, with the exception of maybe 1 or 2 games. And I thought to myself, one, you got to kind of back up from last year. We went out there with, we played about 25 guys on game day, which is fairly typical, maybe a little bit more than usual. But out of those 25 guys, 21 of them were stepping on the field for the first time in their collegiate careers, whether they were seniors all the way down to freshmen. And of those 21 guys, 15 of them were freshmen and sophomores. So across the board, a bunch of dummies, they just don't have the experience, right? And we joke around about it here. We're just like, you don't know what you don't know. And, they're going through it, drinking water out of a fire hose, like, the entire season, on top of the fact that we're traveling to every single game. And, again, everything's awesome. They're playing, they're competing, they're getting better and better. And all of a sudden midterms happen. And it's like, oh my God, I got all this academic work. And then boom, they get hit in the face with, a tough game here. And it just, just all these things they don't think about. But now they do. And so we have the exact same team from last year coming into this year. And so it's like taking the test again. And so I looked at our schedule, and I'm like, man, there's a couple great games here on the schedule that I feel like we can get a little revenge on. Like, they're playing the same opponent that they felt like they were this close, but then they failed. And so, one of the big games obviously was the first game or second game of the season against Marist. But this time, instead of Poughkeepsie, New York, it's right here in Macon, Georgia. And it was a beautiful day, too. And we probably played the most complete game of lacrosse that I've seen in my 4 years. And, Sean and even Carl Roush, my director of ops here, who's been around the program since its inception, said that might have been one of the most complete games in Mercer history. And so from that point, then we started to I think the boys started to realize, like, all right, this can be done. We're not a 2-11 team, although that's who we are. But we can achieve more so long as, again, we stick to what we're good at within ourselves and within the scheme. And so we start the program 2-0, and then we go up to VMI, who they came to our place and beat us at our place. And we're like, okay, here's a great opportunity to go to their place and return the favor. And, we had a tough start. They played really well to start the game. And then I just didn't really panic at all. I just felt like, man, I feel like we're going to come back in this. And the boys did. They closed the gap before the first quarter. And then we went, I think it was a 7 or 8-0 run in the second. And so at that point, we were like, all right, not only can we play well, but we can also not play well and then come back and overcome that. And so we got a 3-0 start, which is the first 3-0 start in program history. And, that was super encouraging and positive and drove a lot of really good vibes amongst the team. Again, we still kind of describe ourselves as a 2-11 in squad. That's what we are. And so we're getting out of that chip at 2-11. And so here we go into a 4-game, juggernaut, to be perfectly honest with you. Certainly Army at home and Richmond right back to VMI. That was a new experience for our guys, having the VMI, then Richmond, which is kind of a conference tournament feel. We started really strong first half. I think the score was probably by 1 or 2. I forget what it was. And then we ran out of gas. That's exactly what happened, whether it be physical gas or emotional gas. Doesn't matter. And it just goes to show you, like an experienced team like Richmond, they ain't going to run out of gas. They know exactly where, to slow down and to ramp it up. And so they took care of business in the second half, and okay, lesson learned. And then we come here, back for another Monday game, unique to Army and Army, again, we were competitive in that first quarter. And then the second quarter got to us. We got outside of ourselves, and they went on, not just like, oh, they answered it with 1 goal. They answered it with 3. And so now all of a sudden we got ourselves in a hole. We continue to compete, but not enough. And then we go on the road for 2 weeks against Drexel and Marquette. And I don't know what it is about Drexel, but they've got our number. We've yet for 2 straight years get off the bus. And, I apologize to Steve Boyle after the game. And I wish we can give you a better game than that. But there were still pieces, even in that game, of not playing great, that, we could still compete with anyone. And then Marquette, the second quarter got to us. So, here we are on a 4-game skid, and things are looking a little grim. But, you just keep relying on the things that you have installed over the last 4 years, the positivity, the leadership. And you're like, all right, here we go. We got another opportunity here. And we compartmentalize the season. First quarter's preseason, second quarter is out of conference games. And so here we are at the last out of conference game, the last 2 minutes of the second quarter, right? And we can finish this thing strong. And that's what we did. We went toe to toe with St. John's. We got up pretty big going into halftime. They made a nice run there in the third quarter, but we stayed the course and stayed strong and got the win. And so here we are, 4-4, as opposed to 1-7, which we were
Congrats
last
on
year.
that. Yeah.
Heading into a bye week with Queens on the horizon here. So,
Coach, one of
giving
the
a
things,
rundown of the year.
Oh, no, I appreciate the rundown, man. It's fun to hear that from the coach's perspective, right? The energy and the love that you have, and that you kind of have thought about the schedule 100 times before even the first game is played. So I love just hearing it from your mouth. One of the things that keeps me energized about the game and just sports in general is that, every year is a little bit different, right? Like every team is different. It's never the same. And I just wonder how you view player leadership from the perspective of maybe even all your total experience, having coached, multiple decades here, of when you have a young team like you're talking about, where it's freshmen and sophomores or just young, inexperienced teams, when you see the player leadership kind of flourish there, as opposed to maybe a more experienced team, a senior led team, maybe. How do you think about player leadership in those environments?
Yeah, I'll kind of double back on what you said earlier that every team is a little different before I kind of answer that. I to this day, I still take full accountability for the 2024 season. So in 2023, we were 6-9. We made the conference tournament for the first time in almost a decade. And so for all intents and purposes, in my first year, with all the obstacles that we had to get through, it was kind of crazy. We had a good year. We had a really good year. And so all those guys, because it was COVID, were coming back. And I thought, all right, it's basically it is the same team. This is what I thought. And so I basically thought I could bring the momentum and bring everything like it was in 2023 and just keep it going. Oh, this is going to be great. And man, I failed that team in 2024 so bad, for various different reasons. And I learned my lesson in that no matter how many faces are in the room are the same, there's a different vibe, there's a different personality, there's different leadership, there's different everything. And you cannot like just take one season and just roll it into the next year. You've got to start from ground zero and build it up, because in that process, you learn more about the guys, you learn more about the team, you learn more about their growth and development and how you can impact their play on the field. But then you can also encourage and empower leadership that you're talking about. And I think one of the things that we've done in terms of leadership is we meet with leadership 3 times a week, every single week. And so I meet with the captains every single Tuesday morning for 45 minutes. And we have the same rundown of questions. Some meetings are more electric than others, especially during the course of the season. And it's awesome to see the comfort level of the guys in that room in my office be able to tell me straight up, like, hey, we don't like the way this is going. Hey, Jimmy is having issues, like, this is what we're seeing. And just getting it all out so that I can either help them and empower them to have intentional conversations with their teammates, or I can intervene and be like, all right, I'm going to meet with them. And I'm going to have a conversation and get to the bottom of this so we can all move forward.
I,
We
I
have a roster. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I love this conversation. I just want to piece out one part, and you don't have to, mention a specific year or anything. Like, have you been on a team where there has been a lack of communication, and from that player to coach or player to player, all of this stuff? What has been kind of the result of that, if you've ever been in that situation in a season?
I think the way we kind of structure our leadership, it's not like for the full year, if that makes sense. There's just moments. And luckily for us, like we found a good system to either catch it, it was a little too late. We need to be better at that. And the guys learn. And so like we need to address this far earlier, because as much as I want to think that I know what's going on with everyone on the team and everything like that, it's like I can't. It's impossible. And unless the guys tell me, then there's nothing I can really do other than constantly ask questions, which I, of course, do. But I think there are moments in certain times of the year where lack of communication happens. And I say this all the time because it often has to do with a player who oftentimes sees their role change, and in that moment, they're uncomfortable with that change, whether it's they're not necessarily playing that much, or literally their position changes, or they're struggling because of X, Y, and Z. And instead of coming to me or coming to a leader or a senior captain, quite honestly, they either A, bitch about it, they internalize it, and it starts a spiral. And every time we catch that, they sit on the couch or they talk to a captain, all of a sudden their play, like it is immediate, 24 hours, changes overnight, whether it's their emotional demeanor, their body language, them just, communicating more, just enjoying the game. This is a Division I lacrosse is a grind out. I mean, we're on practice 43, and we had 45, and that's 80, 90 practices plus all the games, and it's a long year. And so if there are issues, they've got to be addressed, but you got to just talk about it. And so for our system, we've done a good job of bringing guys back into the fold as opposed to allowing them to kind of fade out. So during the tougher times, you can get over those humps a little faster. And we as a team probably didn't get over those humps fast enough in my first couple of years, because as much as my players don't know what they don't know, I, as a new head coach, also don't know what I don't know either. And so And I say this all the time, we together as a program are growing together in this. And the only way we can do it is with communication, with the right and great intentions,
Mm.
and then caring for one another and develop the relationships that matter most so that they can be the best person on and off the field.
I love that breakdown, Coach. It's very interesting. The competitor in me, obviously, wants to win a ton, and we're kind of in the same situation as you in our own right, being
Yeah.
in the Virginia Prep League. And there are teams that we haven't beaten before. And in order to beat those teams, in order to beat the teams that are maybe a little bit more talented than you or a lot of bit more talented than you have to be buttoned up, not just on the field, but you have to be buttoned up and together as a family and in a unit. And I think that we're like on razor thin edges, when it comes to just making sure you're buttoned up and everything. Because if it's not, you're not going to beat those teams that are maybe a little bit more talented than you in that aspect.
No question. We one of our keys to the game, and it has been a reoccurring key to the game, last week and then multiple times before it, is stay connected. Stay connected is a big theme to what we've done this year. And if you look at your offense, right, you want to stay connected. You want to be good outlets and dodge support, right? That's good connectivity on offense, right? Being in the right space to support the ball at all times. On defense, I mean, there's no better way to explain a defense than you've got to stay connected. If Johnny moves 2 feet, I've got to move 2 feet in connection with him. We've all got to move together. In your rides and clears, you're shifting left, right, you're finding open gaps, but you got to create relationships with each other in the clear. And so that's important. Staying connected there, staying connected between the bench guys, the energy on the bench with the guys on the field. And then you got to stay connected off the field. Like the connectivity between the offense and defense, while it's in today's game, is so separated because of just how we play the game, which I think is beautiful. What are the interactions with one another? What are the interactions staying connected between class to class, leadership to the players on the field? Staying connected is so important, and that's the edge. And you look at teams like, keep going back to Army and Richmond. Those teams have had so many years with their head coach who has largely probably encouraged connectivity amongst themselves and their program. Look at where they've gotten, and that's part of culture. That's part of driving really great culture. And so, yeah, staying connected is a big piece of what we do. Whether it's just the small, minute, schematic things, but also the big picture of we're all in this together, and we've got to. One guy moves to the left, shit, we either moving with or we're bringing them back. We gotta be there and all in together on it.
Coach, we're 45 minutes into the conversation, man. This has been great. I do want to kind of break out a little bit more on the kind of the offensive pieces and a couple more things before we let you go. So I'm going to switch gears just a little bit. My pre-episode research, I was looking at your Twitter there and just kind of going back on some of the things that you posted. And I came across like a really quirky or just like out there thing that you're super passionate about, which is the runout rule. This I was just surprised at the amount of info that you talk about with this runout rule, but I'd love for you to break this down. Why is the runout rule, one of the more important rules in sports?
I think you're referring to the PLL Joe Keegs article.
I think so.
Yeah, awesome. I do think so. First off, I think it's pretty fascinating that a lot of people never knew the origin of the rule to begin with. Like some of the lacrosse's most, recognizable faces probably didn't know they just, they grew up and that's the rule. That's the way it works. And when you find out that the origin of the rule is because there were no boundaries, because in the creator's game it was 2 miles long, and whether it was a dispute for X, Y, and Z or a healing game, it was never meant to play in boundaries. And obviously we modernized the game, and so we've got to create rules and we've got to create boundaries, and that's all good and fun. And we have an amazingly beautiful game right now. The shot clock has done wonders, but then you get new people to the sport who, and I go to every single world championship game for the PLL, and I'll sit down and I just love being a fan of the game. And almost every single year, some fan is like, I never understood the reason for why they get the ball back when they chuck it out of bounds and they shoot it. And then when you tell them that, in theory, if there were no boundaries, that the closest person to the ball when the ball went out of bounds would have, in theory, pick it up. and that's the closest rule that you can get to the origin of the game and how it was created. They're like, wow, that's actually awesome. And they originally think it's like, oh, it's so stupid, like a basketball, like you miss a shot and it goes out of bounds, you get it back, and it's like it's not the same thing. And so for that reason, I believe in it as the greatest rule in all sports, because all other sports were created in a more modern way, because it's created for entertainment. And so for our sport, we have this back it up rule, which I think is
Yeah.
great. And by the way, I do have more opinions on this because, like, I don't believe that in our sport, if you shoot the ball and the ball goes out of bounds and there's a flag down, I don't believe we should adjudicate the penalty in that moment. The defense should have to get possession of the ball. And so, because you're still honoring the fact that no, the other team would have picked up the ball on that shot if they were the closest to get there. And so we kind
No
of
dead
lose
ball
sight
yet.
of that a
Yeah.
little bit. Yeah. So there's a little bit of that, but I do think it's an incredible rule and I love the rule.
Man, I'm pulling out a lot of nuggets here, Coach. I got to have you on more. This is fun. I've got some other things I want to touch on here. I guess like more inside the lines, this idea of pace, right? Like that's one thing that's really been fun about the game too. When you think about the origins of the game and how it never stopped, right? I think we did get to a scenario maybe in the 2000s. I remember the horn. The horn was, if you think about it now, oh man, that was a tough time to play the game.
I played in the worst decade of lacrosse in lacrosse history, from like 2000 to 2010. I played my college lacrosse from '02 to '06. It is the worst version of our sport that our sport has ever had. You had, like, take the air out of the ball offense. You had horns. It was 6-4 was like the end score of a lot of games. It is the worst, but keep going. Sorry.
No. I'm just interested in this idea of pace. You coached at Bucknell. You got to Michigan after they had gone to the NCAA, I believe. But I know in the MCLA, they were like famous in running that 10-man when a lot of teams weren't running 10-mans at that time. And I'm just interested in this idea of like up and down, middle of the field pace that you've kind of picked up over the years of coaching at your different spots, and just how you think about that middle of the field pace.
Yeah, I think, we all as coaches across the country, and I don't want to speak for anyone, but we all are in this new age of lacrosse since 2019 till now, in the shot clock era. And it's by far the best era of lacrosse. And there's not one person that would disagree with that. And
you don't want to hold it for 5 minutes. You don't want to touch it in the box. Go ahead.
And then waiting for the ref to keep it in. It's so stupid, right? We are all and we're all new. It's only 7 years, right? And then 2 of them, by the way, were COVID, right? 2020 cooked, and then 2021 was a non-starter either. I mean, that was awful. So it's really like 2019 and then 22 and on, right? And so we're all learning about the different variations of play now with the shot clock, and pace is a big part of it. And I think now, I'll even take our program, we have a comfort level of the pace we want to play. And we go against another team, we identify what is the pace they want to play at. Does it look the same as ours? Okay, it does. All right, so if we play our pace and we play their pace, which is the same pace, will we win the game? Can we win the game? And if the answer is yes, then let's keep with what we're doing, right? But if the answer is no, then we got to figure out, is the pace slow? Is it fast? And you got to go the opposite way, right? And so you got to take away the things that they're good at, right? I mean, that's the main goal, and that's the idea. Otherwise, if you're going to try to play at, say, Utah's pace, and you are a slow it down type of team, you're going to get cooked. Like, they're going to get you. And so from that aspect, the pace is really dependent on your own team and the pace that you set. And then I feel like the barometer from there is just where your opponent is. We found a nice niche in some early offense scheme that we pull out. We caught, we've been able to take advantage of teams in it quite a few times this year. I do think we have a great scheme that goes into it, and it involves everyone. So it's I think certain coaches and certain teams are like, okay, Jimmy, Joey, and Johnny, you can do X, Y, and Z. Everyone else get off the field, you know? And there's a little bit to that in every team, certainly ours as well. But for us, we've created a scheme that everyone can get involved and everyone can take advantage of different pieces of the early offensive scheme, which makes it beautiful. And I
It's
think that a
fun.
lot of teams, a lot of fans might say, oh, offensive guys should know defense, but then wait till your mortgage is on the line and you got guys splitting time in practice. And you're like, no, 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 no. I
That's
just
such a
want them to
great
play
point.
offense really well. So it's just, you're back and forth with it all the time. I think that the evolution of the game and the two-way player, that's the ideal goal for everyone. But until you actually watch a two-way player and their ability to play both offense and defense really well, and you find out there's like one dude every 7 teams that can actually do it at a really good pace, you realize,
So
oh,
true.
okay, we don't have that dude, so therefore let's go to the original way we were playing it. So
Is it easier to teach an
it's,
offensive guy defense or a defensive guy offense? Lightning question.
oh man, honestly, I would say it's probably both equally difficult because it comes down to
Ah,
like how I know I play the middle road, right? But I will give you an answer on this because I'm dead set on it, and this actually ties into recruiting a little bit. It's whoever's bought in more will actually achieve far more.
that's true.
Like the amount of guys that we've been like, hey man, you are so close to getting on that second line of O mids. But then we're like, yo, we got some depth issue at short stick midi. We think you'd be great at it. And he comes in, he's like, coach, I'm already on the other side. I'll flip my jersey. That kid immediately is going to be good
Yeah.
at D. But if you force somebody to do a position and they're
That
not
they
bought
don't want
into
to
it,
do.
then you're cooked. Then they're going to be dog crap no matter what.
Yeah. I'll add at least my take on this is you can have the defensive midi be your sixth guy on offense, and I think you can hide him a little bit more. You can take advantage of some other things. You can't really hide that sixth guy on defense.
Yeah, he's going to
He's,
get exposed real quick under
yeah,
these schemes that are going on, and certainly our scheme. We're going to know where you are at all times,
yeah.
and I couldn't agree more with you. If it's in a game, that's the way I'd want it.
I want to break out this early offense piece because I'm getting more into teaching the 10 man. We're teaching some early offense kind of menu stuff where we have the rope unit kind of setting down picks and staying on the field and then setting up picks. The two things that I've struggled with are the main one is getting my midfielder free off that up pick. Yeah, I don't know if you guys run the up pick with the guy subbing off, or right before he gets off, he kind of sets a pick for the
Yeah, come on
one
in.
of the
The water's
mids.
warm.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. You and everyone else are
right.
all having the same issues, so
Okay.
you're not the only one.
How do you get it in the best scenario from your perspective?
It's really tough because here, what's the first rule in pick play? Don't set a
Don't,
moving pick.
yeah,
That's the first rule in pick play, right? And so if that's the first rule in pick play, the last thing your defensive guy, after you yelling at him a million times that he set a moving pick and gave up, and he also just played 60 to 80 seconds of defense, by the way. The last thing he wants to do is now have to do it again immediately. And
mhm.
so it's really difficult. I find myself, and this goes back to recruiting, guys who have basketball backgrounds have the highest IQ number one of any sport, soccer, football, like any sport, it doesn't matter. But they also have an incredible spatial awareness to be able to set good contact on picks or excuse me, be able to slip out and gain an extra advantage because they're aware of where their defender is behind them. So they realize, hey, look, we can get an extra scenario if I just bail. Even if I can get a good contact on the pick, it doesn't matter. I can get our offensive guy on the field and get an extra situation, right, with a guy coming
Mhm.
on while he's chasing me. And so, yeah, it's tough. I mean, I see that a lot. And so our scheme is kind of built on the idea that you're not going to get a great pick every time. So it's like, okay, well, next thing, if you get
Yeah.
the pick, great. If not, we've got other options now. So it's tough. It's not easy.
Yeah, that is something we tell the guys. We're like, look, it doesn't need to be a great pick. This is just a thing we're doing, right? It's not like end of the world. This needs to be the most perfect pick because that's where you get caught up in the moving pick scenario. The other piece that I think we're tinkering with this as we go, just like we are with the 10 man. And the other piece is sometimes we've created numbers out of that situation where the guy gets to the midfield, we create numbers, and then our guys on the field don't hear us or don't aren't processing the numbers piece. What are some other things that you deal with, I guess, that you,
100% the same stuff.
okay.
And I'm sure they're not hearing it. And then you're looking at the guys who aren't hearing it, and they're sophomores who are playing for the first time in their careers. You know what I
Mm,
mean? Like, a lot of it is like kids who are trying their best, and we talk about it in film all the time. Show us good intentions. Show us that you're trying. Like, you're gonna make mistakes, but at least I can see you on film. Like, I see like your body's moving the right direction. All right, well then just keep going. Keep, like, have a little confidence and get there. And then it's so funny because we actually, a couple games ago, we were talking about, fellas, we just need to listen to what's being said on the sidelines. Like, we're not hearing the extra. You're just blindly subbing, and you got the extra. You got to come back in, otherwise the extra doesn't exist. You don't have the number scenario, and so your issues are common even at the highest levels. And I think that for us, and I also want to back up, like, we've got a really good system for what we're doing, and all the guys know it. But I'll never forget, it wasn't this fall, but it was the last fall. We spent almost 3 months in our fall ball going through it. And like, we would spend a week on it and be like, oh, I thought those were the rules. Because we like to create rules
yeah.
just so that, like, here are the 5 things, and you're just going to go through the menu and work it out. Nothing complicated. And we kept changing the rules because the guys would show us either A, it works, or this works. Oh, that's cool. Let's do that. That's really cool. Or this doesn't work because they're executing it, but the scheme sucks. So then we spent 3 months getting to where we are now. And even now, the guys are showing us little subtleties, but at least they're subtleties as opposed to a total change of scheme. But in terms of listening, and it comes right back to leadership. It comes back to experience. It comes back to the guy adjacent to the guy who's not listening being like, yo, Jimmy, come back, come
Yeah.
back.
They
That's
got to
the only
echo.
way. Because if you're constantly joysticking guys in the field, and it's just really difficult because they're just not going to hear everything you're saying.
Yeah, that echo call is definitely important in that scenario. No, great stuff all together, man. This is a fantastic discussion. Offensive principle wise, I had a good conversation with Dylan Sheridan. He was kind of coaching me through this kind of early offense stuff when I was just trying to pick it up, and I asked him to start subset question, right? So it was pace, space, and matchups. I'm interested in how you think about those offensive principles and kind of ranking those 1, 2, 3, start, subset.
In an early offensive perspective.
Just in offense in general.
Yeah, I think it comes back to the whole stay connected thing, right? And I think that that's a big piece to it. We run our offense a little bit different in terms of, we're an entry based offensive team. So we're in a set, and then we have an entry to an initial dodge, right? And so you can rotate and change guys in different spots, and we'll do that basically to put some pressure on an initial slide package early. And so if you can, because bottom line is, in any offense, and again, I am speaking generalities, and I hope they fit for a majority of guys that are out there, but if you can't break down a defense on an initial dodge, then effectively you're going to have an ugly day on offense, right? And you don't necessarily have to create slides all the time. You just have to have a defense that respects you enough to react to what you're doing. And then from there, if they're reacting to what you're doing, but not completely sliding to you or doubling you, whatever it might be, then you can manufacture rotations in an offense. And so from that kind of basic principle of, all right, using initiations to create pressure on the defense. All right, now where are we now? We are in what everyone calls the gray, right? The actions in the middle. And it's like, well, as a coach, you can control the first, 10 seconds of an offense, right?
Yes.
And then you can control, say, the back action, 15 seconds, maybe off an end
Off and
line
online.
or kind of a reset, right? But you can't control the biggest piece, which is the 20 and 30 seconds that the guys play. And the only thing you can do is create kind of menu items. And you mentioned this earlier. The only thing you can do is kind of create menu items and roles for the guys on the field at any given time to then use, all right, I am in this role. Here is the menu item in my head, and understanding what my teammate and his strength is. And that's what I need to accomplish. And then we can consistently keep the ball moving to our advantage to from player to player to one, keep compressing the defense. So either A, there's a bad approach. B, there's a missed approach. C, just they've compressed so much that we're able to move the ball for a time and room opportunity. But basically, what we're doing is we have six roles on the field at all times. There's six guys on the field at all times, right? And so you've got the dodger, the guy with the ball. You've got a front and backside outlet at all times. Otherwise, you're in trouble. You've got an inside outlet. You've got a backside island. And then you kind of got this Swiss Army knife, what we call like the pinch roll, where either you can come in, and play kind of a two-man crease, or you can get to the perimeter as well. And
Hmm.
each one of these roll, whether you're the backside outlet or the front side outlet, you have a menu item of things that you can do in there. Whether it's the, you know, common terminology I feel like people use is drifting, right? You're drifting adjacent to the ball carrier as he runs to you.
Hmm.
And so that's one thing.
Clear
Of
through.
course,
All
you
right.
can set picks in the follow aspect. So there's all of these menu items, and you can get to these roles based on your own strengths and based off of your teammates' strengths. So, for example, if Mac O'Keefe was a teammate of mine, and I'm a heavy shooter, but Mac O'Keefe scoring at 41% and shooting 300 and 400 something times in his career, I'm going to get pushed out of the spot I want to be in, and so I need to
You're a passer
recognize
now.
that. And so, what's that?
You're a passer now. He's the shooter.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But
Yeah.
but the only way I know that is if I recognize that and I'm like, all right, well, I guess I'm the window today in this set because Mac has got to be the time and room option. So Mac might be in the inside in this, and I'm like, yo, Mac, get yourself to the perimeter. And I'm either cutting, setting a pick, but he's making his way out there. And so the offense that we run does take some time in order for it to kind of come together. But once it does, the gray works really, really well, and the ball flies around pretty fast. And you always want to get to that point where they stop thinking about what their role is and what the menu item is, and they start playing that game of lacrosse in the gray.
How are you manufacturing a slide or offense essentially when you go up against a team like a Richmond or an Army who are really strong on ball defenders and you're just not beating your guys? How do you look at that type of game that you're going to have?
Yeah, in fact, I learned about manufacturing rotations when I was at Bucknell playing Army twice a year, once a year. And by the way, Navy, the same, same type of team as well. And you can manufacture rotations simply by using human tendencies. And obviously there's a little bit of scouting involved to it too. So imagine you're in an alley or a wing, okay, and you've got a guy at X and you've got a defender on the near side pipe of the wing that you are dodging on, right? Because he's supporting the help defense, right? But he's on the near side. And when you drive to the rack, the further away the guy at X goes, typically that defender will go with. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So he's
Yep.
going to kind of stretch out. But let's just say that guy at X no longer is drifting early. He's going to stay to that near side, which now it's kind of counterintuitive. You think that, well, you're going to be in the dodge path. That defender is going to be in the dodge path. But what happens when you dodge really hard, you make first move, first contact, you're getting to the middle of the field, you haven't quite beaten your guy. But what you're doing to the near side defender is you're putting him in a tough position. You're like, man, I could get a free double here and squeeze him down because he's playing pretty good defense. And if I just go ahead and I can slide adjacent, it's not an adjacent package at all.
You're almost baiting him into
Oh,
doubling.
exactly. And oftentimes what you're doing is you're baiting them and the defender, and if you drive from a Dodgers perspective, right at him, he does two things. He either comes to you as a normal human reaction, or his feet stay right where they are. And at that point, that's when the guy at X is what we call speed drifting. He speed drifts because he sees him frozen. And so now it's like, all right, well, we
It's
didn't draw a slide, but now you're going to have to rotate. So now I pass it through X, And now the defender has two choices. He can jump over the back of the net and try to get a really good drifting attackman and try to cut him off, or the defense cuts their losses and they're like, yep, you caught us. And so now we're going to rotate. And so are you ready to rotate fast enough? And hopefully by ball movement, you can find the matchup that you wanted on the front end, which is a short stick or, a defender that you want against one of your better players. And so that's one of many examples of what we call manufacturing rotations or pressure on the defense, is using human tendencies against the team that you're playing, because they're like, man, this is really tempting. I could just quick double, because you see teams, they just want to, slam down and because it's good defensive principles. If you're there, well, go
Put
ahead.
some pressure on. Yep.
That's right. But the problem is if we're ready for it and the drift, and the drifting technique has to be and when we talk about if you're lazy in your skill set, that defender just hops right back over and he's able to take an angle. So our drift technique has to be perfect, and that's when you're able to manufacture.
It's kind of like thinking about this like inversely from the defensive perspective. It's kind of like a bluff on a slide. When you bluff, you stop that attackman in a way. You like stop his momentum, and it's kind of the same thing. Right. You're kind of bluffing a dodge almost, but you're baiting him into that motion. But if you know you're doing it, you can get back or in defensive terms is what I'm talking about. So,
but the risk is, man, he's not really beat, but maybe he is. Mm-hmm. And so if I bail and I get underneath cause it is against a short stick, and, we do have guys that can, turn the corner, and he gets in front of the cup. Now it's like, well, shit, I should have just stayed there. And the human tendency is like, man, he's running right at me and he's not an angle to score. I'm just gonna go. Like I'm right there. And so it's a tough spot to put defenses in. But that's just like using human tendencies against, a defense to manufacture this thing. We talk about manufacturing stops all the time on defense. And those are like, cheap ways of backing up and poaching a shot, like that's manufacturing stops. Free doubles to the backside of a guy who's not really paying attention, manufacturing stops, putting the ball on the ground. And so you try to like manufacture these things because they're not necessarily as easy as they should be when you're going against a team with high quality athletes and opponents.
Coach, we're an hour and 12 minutes in, so I've held you way over time. I'm going to ask you last two lightning questions here.
Sure.
The one I kind of asked earlier, but I want to get your answer here. Start, sub, or sit, pace, space, or matchups. Would you rather have, essentially, when you're kind of building an offense? So almost like ranking number 1, number 2, number 3 for you.
Space, pace, and what?
Matchups. I put you on the spot here.
Yeah, that's a great one. I'm sitting space. Space is the last one. It's definitely pace and matchups. And probably first and foremost, I would say matchups. Matchups are so key, because if you don't have the right matchups, I mean, they're just going to sit on you all day long on your hips, and it's just going to be stagnant offense. Pace can be good because you can catch them, say, like in early offense. And we say this all the time too, like we are not going to beat an Army team playing 6-on-6. Like you're not. But do we have a shot playing 5-on-5 or catching their own mid on the defensive end? And I'm assuming that's what you mean by pace, is creating kind of like this transition early offense style. But I do think that, the only thing that you can consistently get every time, because pace doesn't always work. Like it doesn't always present itself, guys getting on the field. Now it's like, well, matchups have to be number 1 by, kind of default logic, but pace is a really good one because, certainly we use it a lot. Space, I mean, if you look at Judd Lattimore's early offensive stuff when he coached on the offensive ball, he actually went against space, and he did a lot of stuff called probing, where he would actually bring and force the defense and his offense into kind of one side of the field. So the spacing was what you would consider, or what we would consider, poor, but he's doing it on a purpose so he can get what he wants.
Like overloading.
On the field. Exactly. And so you can, and he would always say, like, imbalance is good balance. Like, and I don't know if that's, I don't want to use his words or make up words, but he would always say every offense wants to have perfect spacing, but that's where the defense takes advantage of it, because I can sit in a spot defensively, and if somebody leaves, I know somebody else is coming right back into my zone. So I could just wait here. And so
It's
I
very
think from a
structured.
spacing, it's a lot of offenses are super structured. But you can certainly create an effective offense
Got
without
it.
perfect spacing.
Got it. I love it. This is great. I love that start sub sit, and I'm going to let you out of here. My last
No
question
problem.
this was the one I got kind of tied up on earlier that I completely, blanked on, but it's running
No
that
worries.
that hangman, right? That 5v5. What set do you usually kind of run, or what type of things are you doing in that environment with the 5v5 when you do have like a hangman scenario, or if you keep them inside too, like you keep a Fogo inside or an offensive midi inside? Just I'm just interested. Once you have those scenarios, what type of stuff are you kind of dealing?
Yeah, for us, again, it comes back to our basic principles and our basic entries. We when you have say it was like 8-on-8, right? Like I'm just going like 8-on-8. You would get intricate because there are a lot of guys on the field, so you can get like complicated in certain ways. And I feel like the less guys you have, so you have 6-on-6, you've got to get creative. 5-on-5, you don't need to be creative. 4-on-4, it's like meat
Just
and
finds it.
potatoes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so the less guys you have on the field, the less you want to overcomplicate things. And so for us, we just go to the basics. It's drive, drift, getting to attacking goal line extended. It's using the only short stick on the field in that 5-man rotation or 5-man defense, and really putting him on an island and forcing him either to play great off-ball defense, or it's forcing him to play great on-ball defense, which we all know is probably the toughest position in our game to do. And so between those two, and then everyone playing around and supporting the guy with the ball, we like to keep our guy, the fifth or the sixth guy, the hang up, whichever one you want to use, away from, and just let our 5-on-5
Okay.
work. And so, we're either following with a pick play, or we oftentimes too will bring a pole to a short stick in these scenarios to set a pick, because what is a pole taught to do from Monday through Friday? This is your matchup. This is how you're going to defend them. And so a pole playing off-ball pick defense changes for them. They're like, oh, this is easy. I can just stay skinny here, and I'm going to be able to keep on my matchup. Problem is contact's made. He's not in a good position to help, and all of a sudden, boom, goes right
It's
by
gone.
you,
Yeah.
and you're not ready to do it. And so we call those big on little picks, as opposed to a big pick, which we see all the time. But in those situations, you look at some of the best close defenders in the world, they are really good at getting around short stick picks, because that's all they see every single day, every single possession. You bring a big to a little pick, and they're like, oh yeah, this is easy. And then they forget that, oh, sometimes the pick works and you've got to help out.
Yeah.
And so that becomes a problem sometimes. But in
Or
either
to your
case, we like
point,
to play 5-on-5 and keep it simple.
to your point, you're almost setting them up for the double, right? They want to, if they're in that off ball position, they get antsy. They're like, I'm going to create a turnover here off the ball.
There you go. And
Yeah.
and then through the scout, we realize, oh, they're going to jump this.
Mhm.
So come off it, bounce really quick, throw a shovel pass or get the ball out. And now you've essentially, by bringing a big to a little, you've manufactured
Yeah.
rotations on the defense by human natural reactions.
Coach, this has been one of the better podcasts here that I've had in quite some time, man. So, Coach Danehy, you did a fantastic job. I'll have to have you back after the season, man.
I appreciate
Great
it,
talks. Thank you.
Thank you, buddy. I appreciate it.